The Guardian, I don't know if you've seen their match report on yesterday's game, Phil, or James. I don't know. You might not be Guardian readers. Here's how it starts. Written by PA Media. I wonder what those initials stand for. Great surname. Sam Burgess paid tribute to George Williams after the fly half led from the front. What? What's a fly half? What's one of those? What fisherman say? Warrington, they're through to the final. Sam Burgess is great. We'll talk about that in a moment. 46 points to 10. Almost, I mean, you were at both these games, Phil. Was it almost a repeat of Saturday's game, or was it slightly different?
Pretty much. I think you knew that, when it was 12-0 in the very early stages, that was probably it. Yes, Huddersfield have the ability to grind away at the opposition, and maybe it was that try just before half time that made it 22-4 when you finally realised that they weren't going to mount a comeback. But as we were saying with the whole KR game, a lot of it is about discipline, which is not so much whether you give penalties away or not, although that clearly is a factor within your discipline. It's what you do when you've got the ball in good position, and it's what you do when you try and mop up if you've made a mistake. And Hull KR didn't have a lot of it, and Huddersfield had none of it. And I of the two games, that was the most disappointing one, because I just don't think Huddersfield turned up. And I think you have to mention Jake Connor, that, it's not all down to him. It clearly can't be. But some of the petulance that he showed as the game went on, some of the still trying to get into the heads of the opposition and under their skin when you're already in virtually a losing position, has more of a detrimental effect on your own team than it's ever. All that happens then is that the crowd and certainly, I think Danny Walker, when there was the sin binning, who was having to go back at him, all it does is it makes you look small and foolish, and it starts to, I think, get under the skin of your own players who are trying their hardest to stay in a game, and all the time, all they're doing is looking around, going, "What is he doing now? Why do I have to go over there and fish him out of this hole?" Or, "Oh, why is there a fight started over there? Because he's done something that he didn't need to do." And I think there was a very, very telling comment by Ian Watson in the post-match press conference, and he was asked by Mr. PA Media, what do you do about Jake Connor? And he said, well, to be fair to Jake, I need to have that conversation with him before I have it with the media, but we have to do something. And this isn't all about Jake Connor, but it is about how when you get to big games and you need your big players to stand up and do the things that they can do best, when they don't do it, they do become a liability.
Ian Watson talks about process. Now, where in the process does it talk about some of the behaviours that Jake Connor displays? And we had a similar conversation a few weeks ago when they played at St Helens, and he stood there sort of looking for a decision from the referee, while meanwhile St Helens scored a try. And I said at the time that I was critical of Ian Watson's comments in the press, because he was basically sort of almost defending Jake Connor and suggesting that the referee should have made a decision. Well, he's entitled to that view, but I gave the opinion that all that does is play into the hands of Jake Connor, which I think it does. And I think he made a fair point that if I was a player on that team, I'd be thinking, hang on a minute, you're getting us in the mess here again, potentially. And yeah, he's a magician, sometimes with the ball in hand and what he can do. But you can't be rocks and diamonds. The best players are the most consistent players, and that part of his game has to change, and that's ultimately why he's not being selected for England and won't be selected for England unless he has a major overhaul of the way in which he plays. I think he creates potentially more disruption in a team than the benefit that he can bring when he does perform. And as I say, he's a talented player, but I know sometimes you've got to accept that players have personality traits, and that makes them a great player, but we've not seen him perform on a consistent basis year in, year out that merits the odd occasion where he may, be erratic in his behaviour. But, as I say, I didn't see more than a couple of minutes of this game. But again, from the outside looking in, it looks a one-sided game, and another semi-final where a team hasn't shown up, which, is disappointing. I think actually Huddersfield have probably done quite well to end up in a semi-final based on where they are in the league table and how their season's been going, because it's certainly been an inconsistent year.
And especially after, we've talked about Hull KR playing against Catalan. Huddersfield won in Catalans in this competition. And that's no easy place to go, obviously. Cliche. But to then almost not turn up, and I don't want to take anything away from Warrington, but that's what the scoreline suggests. They were blown away early doors and could never get back into this one. And you look at Mikey Lewis is a player who likes to give it out, but he didn't give it out when they were losing to Wigan on Saturday. He just got on with his job, and I don't know what he felt inside. He was probably massively frustrated, as they all were, but he's managing to keep a lid on things at the minute.
Yeah, I think, again, you've got to look at, does that result now in Catalan actually mean anything? Because if you don't go on and get to the final and maybe win it, it's another occasion where you've had a great 80 minutes in a season that, falls flat, in which case, how do you evaluate that 80 minutes? And, I don't know what Huddersfield would look at and say went wrong in that game. I just don't think they ever had a measure of control over it, which would be a concern for the remainder of the season, because now clearly they've got some ground to make up in Super League, and they're going to have to do some convincing of their fan base, committed though it might be, but small though it undoubtedly is, that they should keep turning up every week. And in some ways, Jake Connor does sum them up, that they have the ability on a given week to play really well against opposition that perhaps you wouldn't think they would beat and look fantastic. But if you cannot do that in the big games when it really matters, then it doesn't count for anything. And by the time we get to Wembley and we're talking about Sam Burgess, because he will hog all of the headlines. It's great from a media point of view that he's there. He's one of the people outside of our, enclave of rugby league minded lovers that people will instantly identify with. He does interview well. He does say the right things. I think, it, again, was very good in the post-match, deflecting away from it. Stop talking about me. It's nothing to do with me. It's all about the guys. And, but he has a storied history behind him on a number of levels. And that buys us publicity that perhaps we don't normally get. So he'll be the talking point. This, our Wigan at the start of another dynasty, will be the next storyline, which, they are well worthy of being discussed in that manner. What we won't be talking about is Huddersfield did really well at Catalan in the quarterfinals, and that's where I think Ian Watson has a problem, and that's where I think the makeup of his team and what he wants that team to be. And we talk about it every week. Identity. Hull are going through this at the moment. What is their identity? What sort of players do they need to sign or want to sign that epitomise what they want to be and who they are and what they stand for? And I don't see that. They'll probably go on now and have an unbeaten run and get to the playoffs. I just don't see, on the back of where they were last year, how Huddersfield have changed this year. And if they do lose Luke Yates to Warrington next year, which is heavily rumoured at the end of his contract, then again, that is a massive loss, because if you do need someone to follow who's got one of the best work ethics around, you take him out of that. I don't know who they'll get to replace him.
Looking at the Super League table, 11 played, 8 wins, 3 defeats. Why Sam Burgess the greatest coach ever and Paul Wellens lucky to have a job?
Isn't it strange how the world of sport and the world of rugby league looks? I don't know whether that's partly influenced by the criticism that was probably levelled at his appointment, actually, in the first place.
Is that us now? I think we were questioning it somewhat on this programme. We're not going to hide.
But I think, probably legitimately, as we've discussed, probably in relation to Richie Myler, and it's no criticism of the individuals concerned. It's, if you were looking to recruit somebody and looking at respective CVs, there were probably people that applied for that job at Warrington that may have had a stronger CV in terms of a coaching career. But what you probably can't question is Sam's pedigree and willingness to win, and his effort and his desire, and actually that counts for a lot. And when Phil's talking about identity of a club, clearly that seems to be what Warrington are trying to build on. And players have referenced in post-match interviews, haven't they, that if I'm feeling not 100%, or I've got taken a knock in a game or whatever, I know what my coach has done when he was playing, and he's not going to ask me to do anything that he hasn't done himself. And I think when you set that culture from the top, and he's prepared to give youth a go, then you can see actually that it's a bit of a winning combination in some ways. It might not get them over the line this year, but actually, given a few years, they may get there. So, it may play into Wigan's hands that Sam can take the headlines going into the cup final, and they can come in as almost not quite underdogs, but they can go under the radar as the team that is a successful team, and Sam can take the headlines. But I still would suggest that Wigan would be the favourites going into that game because of their recent successes. But I wouldn't write off Warrington, to be honest, and the attitude that Sam can bring to that team going into a major final.
And he hasn't had yet that period where he's got to ask questions of himself and his team, because they've been relatively successful so far.
I think the other thing we should point out is that Martin Gleeson needs to take a lot of credit, that where Sam may be naive in the intricacies of coaching because he's only at the very beginning of his journey, the people he has around him and he can rely on and can add the bits to his coaching portfolio that perhaps he doesn't have at the moment is Martin Gleeson and the way that they attack. And I think that is epitomised by Matt Duffy. Because I think, again, whilst he possibly didn't have the petulance in character that Jake Connor does, and this isn't Let's Have a Go at Jake Connor podcast, Matt Duffy was very much rocks and diamonds last year, that whilst you knew, give him some space, he was one of the quickest players in the competition, he'd burn you. He wasn't renowned for his defence. He wasn't renowned for being around when the going got really, really tough. And to coin phrase, putting his body on the line, he was one of these, give me the ball and I'll do something for you. I think the Matt Duffy we're seeing at the moment is the complete opposite of that. That he's getting as much kudos off his teammates and his coach for the try-saving tackles. If they're scoring off the back of those try-saving tackles, that's great. And I think that's something that Sam Burgess has brought in, that we are in this together. We have had very talented individuals before. We bought some very good teams, but we've never achieved anything because we've just got a collection of talent. What we haven't got is that will and desire amongst us. He's sprinkled into that some local youngsters, which Warrington traditionally haven't done in the past. And I think the most important thing for me after the game was watching Sam Burgess walk round with the players, and the players' kids were all on the pitch as well, with the rapport that he has rapidly got inside 3 months with the Warrington fans, because he's giving them exactly what they want. And yes, they're winning more games than they're losing. Yes, he's taken them to Wembley very, very quickly. But what they've got is a team that they really, really can get behind. And they can look at people like James Harrison. They can look at Danny. When Danny Walker wasn't a risk because he was already the England hooker. But when you let Darryl Clark go, you're investing a lot of confidence into Danny Walker, who has admittedly bided his time and deserved it. But Danny Walker is repaying them with the kind of performances that the Warrington fans are now looking at him and going, we'll call him one of us, because he's playing in a way that we haven't gone out and bought him. He's served his apprenticeship. He knows what is expected. He hung around when he didn't have to. He could have gone to most other Super League clubs if they were looking for a hooker, but now he's doing it for us, and he's wearing the shirt, and he wants to wear the shirt. And I just think that sort of cohesion that Sam has brought very, very quickly is to his credit. And that may not be his coaching ability, that may be his man management.